as part of your, development with law and stuff like that, you became an accredited police representative, which allowed you to go into police stations and represent clients and get them out of there, basically. Tell us about that.
Well, that all started with me looking at what solicitors did as to how the representation that I'd received from them, just move this forward, all comes with how I'd received representation from them. And, the lack thereof, they're more like babysitters turning up at the police station just telling you to be quiet, say nothing, and then all of the tools are open, like they've got the inference, etc. So I decided to look into it and see, well, if they can do it, so can I. So I did the first, which was a written exam, and that was basically on the on a number of indictable offences, summary offences, where I had to go in, sit an exam. I did no research for this. I just thought with the knowledge I had.
I've been in there enough times.
I know it. I've been accused of everything anyway.
I've read Pace enough times sitting in that cell.
Well, I'd gone a little bit further than the codes of practice.
Okay.
But I did have the police and criminal evidence, a handbook that was written. I can't remember by who, but it was quite an insightful book that helped me a lot of the time when being harassed by them. So I did the exam, and that is basically a written exam on breaking down the elements of an offence or the elements of any defences available to an offence. I passed that exam, but then it required me to do what was called a portfolio, and a portfolio is where basically you need a solicitor. You need someone who's a duty solicitor who will take you into a police station. You monitor them in 2 interviews, then they monitor you for 2 or 3 interviews, and then you'll do 5 or 10 interviews on your own, and then you'll write up a portfolio of everything that's happened, and you'll have to blank out the client's details. So these are like a real case study, if you like. I passed that because all of the clients that I represented at the time, well, none of them got charged, so it never really went any further than that. Because I find that if you do a good job in the police station, that can end the case from a police's point of view.
Wasn't that one of the things that you've discovered first, was how poor the procedure was in police stations with police and how they treat prisoners? And wasn't that one of the first things that you discovered, is that nobody defends people in there, and you were one of the first to come in and say, hang on a minute, you're not doing this properly, you're not doing that properly, you're meant to be doing this, you're meant to be doing that. Because it's all nice and cozy, isn't it, with the duty solicitor? He's on board with the plot, and
Not necessarily. It doesn't. I always thought that myself. Yeah. As a duty solicitor, to understand what the duty solicitor is every law firm that has, say, a legal aid franchise. Basically, you've got to be granted a legal aid franchise to represent people in, say, the criminal law or civil law, and it's a specific legal aid franchise for each different thing. Now, if you're in the criminal law and you've got a legal aid franchise, then you're put on what's called a rota. So every law firm that's got a legal aid franchise in Liverpool, for instance, in the Liverpool postcodes district, well, they will go on a duty roster. So if they've got, for instance, 2 duty solicitors, I wouldn't class as a duty solicitor, but if we had 2 duty solicitors in our firm, which we did, then we would get 2 slots. A slot would be from 9 in the morning till 9 at night, and then 9 at night till 9 in the morning. So that would be 2 slots, but it would be a rota, so it would go. Some of the bigger firms have a lot more duty slots, and clients, especially for people who don't intend on getting or don't have a history of getting arrested and don't have a solicitor, well, they'll just go, give me the duty solicitor. So I've attended many as the duty solicitor. For the purposes of PACE, someone who's an accredited police station representative is to be treated as a solicitor. So I would be acting as a solicitor in all those police station interviews. I was big on the procedure, and a lot of people don't understand what goes on from behind the closed doors in a police station. For me, it was my favourite part of the job. I'd gone from
literally crossed the other side of the line, and
I'd gone from sitting on the other side of the table to now sitting on this side and understanding what the fuck went on before my solicitor came in to actually represent me in Ian's. Every time I've had a solicitor, they've always told me, just be quiet.
So you were being sent in as the 4th emergency service, mate.
That's what I was referred to.
Get me the hef.
I did have that reputation.
Prison breaks, basically, where you were getting people out of police stations that shouldn't have been there, or shouldn't have been there as long as they were, or shouldn't have been treated the way they were being treated, and you were coming in fighting for your clients, basically.
I ended the 24-hour rule, if you like. So, because I was always in the station for 24 hours, and this is important for people to know what your rights are in the police station. If you sit and you don't ask for a solicitor, then you're more likely to be trampled on, because the police will they put you on what's called a lie down or a sleepover, as it is. So if they arrest you, they go out, they arrest people at 10 o'clock at night, and then they put them to bed for 8 hours, and they'll interview them at the convenience, 9, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock when it comes. Under pace, they don't get to do that. They've got to interview you. The only reason that they can arrest you, and the normal thing that they say is for a prompt and effective investigation. Well, I demanded a prompt and effective investigation. So once I would receive a call to notify me that a client was in the station, I would call up the custody sergeants and I would ask, well, what are they being held for? Custody sergeants, this is generally, and this is just wide in the profession, it'd be, well, we're still investigating at the moment, and we'll let you know when he's ready.
Building a case.
Yeah, we'll let you know when he's ready. I go, no, officer. You're not allowed to just be arresting my client and keeping him in there. If you don't have the evidence to retain him in there and interview him now, why are you arresting him now? What is the purpose? What's going on in the interview? I'd ask a series of questions, and then at 6 hours, I'd phone up and I'd want to make representations to the inspector that it wasn't a prompt or effective investigation. I would go against everything that they claim, because they arrest people and they're just they're lying them down because the officer's going home to bed. And solicitors just leave them there. I would be out at the house at 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 1 in the morning.
So they're only allowed to keep you for 24 hours, aren't they? Without charge. 24
hours without charge, unless they get the authorisation of an inspector. It's not an inspector, it's a superintendent. If they get a superintendent's authorisation, then to detain you for a further 12 hours.
And what circumstances can they do that? Is it more serious offences? Is that?
More serious offences, yeah. And it's not just whether it's more serious offences. It depends on the nature of the investigation they're carrying out, and how in depth it is. I personally don't think that there's any excuse to need to detain someone for that long, because when you're in interviews with clients, and
let's say they've got a wrong, a fucking wrong, and they shouldn't be out on the streets. What are the processes and procedures then, so they can charge them, interview them, charge them, put them on remand? I mean,
well, charge comes at the end of the interview. Once they've charged you, then the interview process is over. So people think that, it's like bail. Section 47(3) bail is just police bail, and you're RUI'd, released under further investigation. So no one's charged at that point. Generally, you'll get a bail date to reappear, or you might not have a bail date to reappear, and you're just left in limbo for months while some unknown investigation's going on, and that can be quite stressful for a lot of people. There's nothing you can do to stop that. But my view was not, it didn't matter to me who the client was. It didn't matter to me what the client was charged with. It didn't matter to me whether the client's innocent or guilty. My job's not to prove innocence or guilt. My job's not to judge the client, no matter what the viewpoints are, no matter where they come from, no matter what the background. I don't even care what the offence is. My job is to go in and give that client a fight. If, the first thing I asked is, do you want to fight? If I'm meeting with you, Loz, at the other end of a table now, I'm saying, are you wanting to defend yourself against this allegation, or are you wanting to plead guilty to it? That's the only answer they need to know right now, because you've got to shield your clients. Because
so let's say that the client says they don't want to fight, they want to plead guilty. What would that?
Well, if they want to plead guilty, then that comes with giving a full admission on tape.
So that's the interview. Then you just confess to whatever it is, and then if they say they want to fight, then you kick into gear.
If they want to fight,
your top comes off.
Generally, what I'd say is, if you don't want to fight, you don't need me.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm not here to just lead people down the aisle and hand them over to whatever. I'm here to look after your best interests. And if you know that you banged to rights on an offence and you want to plead guilty, well, now is the time to do it, and to mitigate any eventual sentence that may well come from whatever the criminal conduct is that's being alleged. But generally, my thing was going in and fighting for people who are, the police are assuming that they've done something. 9 times out of 10, it's like fishing. The last interviews I went, I should have took me fishing rods with me, because that was all that they do. Is it's just pulling
people. Trying to get you to confess.
Well, they get look, you put someone in a room for 24 hours, treat them like a dog, right? Then, you know, you're giving them inhumane and degrading treatment.
You just want out of there, don't you?
People want out. They'll say whatever that they're told to say. They're very nervous. You know, even the hardest of criminals. I've gone in there and you'd wonder sometimes which one of us was the one being accused of the offences, because I feel like slapping them. I'm like, pick yourself up, right, and get your act together, because what you do here is going to make a big difference now for, you know, depending on the sentence, for a long time in the future in your life. And this is not a time to just say... And the
police are well aware of that, aren't they?
Of course they are. Yeah. You know, the inference rule, it says you've got the right to remain silent.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's what I found interesting was, you know, how that fundamental right has changed. You know, the right to remain silent. Everybody knows that, don't they? Everybody, because of television and all that, everyone knows that saying, you've got the right to remain silent. But now, with this new inference law, which is that if you do remain silent...
It's not that new, though.
Okay, well, it's new for me. No, but
knowing it is new.
The point being is that they're now saying that, well, you haven't actually got the right to be silent. Is that if you are silent, it will be ruled against you. That you didn't. You had the opportunity to put forward your defence, but you didn't do it at the time. Therefore, you can't rely on it in court. Is that a correct analysis of it?
Well, yeah. And the thing is sometimes people go, well, why wouldn't people who are innocent put forward the story?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because you don't trust the police.
Well, when you don't know what you're being accused.
Yeah.
You know, when you don't know what the offences are that you're being accused of, or you're being given a summary of what the offences are, but you're not being told, well, what role you played in it or what part. I attend as someone that I'm supposed to come and give legal advice. How can you give legal advice without knowing what the evidence is and the circumstances of what it is you're alleging the client's done? So this would be how they'd get a lot of, because they'd just point blank say, well, no, we're not answering. I get to question the police before the police get to question my clients. Boy, was that fun.
Hold on. It's a waste of a lifetime for that one. Yeah. So before the interview begins, you question the police and they say, what evidence have you got against the client, so that you can give your client legal advice on how best to approach the interview?
Well, yeah, you know, I'm there to protect the client's best interests. Yeah. I'm there to give the client advice on the legal definitions of what the offence are and what the elements are, and letting them know, well, what available defences may be available. For instance, someone who might, let's say, for instance, witnesses a police officer punching someone and assaulting someone in the face and comes to their aid. Well, they have a legal defence to come to the aid of another person who's suffered an assault. So I would be advising, well, okay, it may well be a police officer that now we're defending against, but that person could go in and say a whole array of different things with professional interrogators who will twist and, you know, try to blemish the person's character so that they can take that forward to a judge or a magistrate or a Crown Court judge or a jury, whatever it may be, to make them look guilty of somewhat way. For me, the best advice anyone could have is to put forward a prepared statement. Now that takes time, because when I got...
So if you don't have the time or the lawyer that's in place at the time, and you don't want to give... you're concerned that if you give a no-comment interview, that you won't be allowed to defend yourself in court, but at the same time, you don't want to comment too much because you don't feel as if you understand the case so much. But what's the best advice for someone in that situation if they haven't got the fourth emergency service on hand?
Well, it's a prepared statement.
Yeah.
Whenever you're going into the police station, it's to understand that you are already being investigated for a crime. You're not being presumed innocent, because otherwise you wouldn't be there. You know, an innocent person or someone who's being presumed innocent is not arrested, carted off in handcuffs, locked in a room, and then brought forward and had the allegations. You know, if you were someone rich and famous, you'd probably get a letter through the post telling you, well, we think that this has happened, and you'd get to have all the time in the world to write back. When you're in a police station, it's a very concerning time, and most people, like you say, they just want to get out. They don't care what they have to say to get out. They don't understand what the repercussions of just getting out early may well have at a later stage, depending on the severity.
So this is a tactical change. It's quite a massive tactical change. Is that in that critical place where you're under immense pressure, where you've been deprived of your liberty, deprived of the heating, right? You've been given a very tough set of circumstances in which to handle it, and then all of a sudden you've got to put forward your defence, right? And if you don't put forward your defence and you remain silent, you're not allowed to do it in court.
Well, take there being a robbery as an example. Let's say there was a robbery at the petrol station on Anfield Road, and you've got a client who is unlucky enough to have been walking by there, or someone who's been in there, but not guilty of the offence, but he fits the description that's being given, i.e. he's wearing a mask and he's of average build, he's 5'10", right? He's nabbed by the police. He's got all the circumstances that are against him because he's been there. Now, once the police are putting these questions to him and they're going to allege, if you're being told or accused of an armed robbery that you didn't do, and it's at a petrol station, for instance, where you've just been, are you going to tell the police? Do you trust the police to just rule you out if you're going to tell them? A lot of people will think no, and they will automatically lie, or they will want to lie because people, it's a natural instinct for them to do.
Self-preservation.
Self-preservation. Some people will lie just because it comes natural to them. Some people will lie because there's some reason for doing so. My advice in these, when I am speaking with the clients, is I would set out and say, well, look, this is the thing, is if you've been near that petrol station, the police will prove it, because eventually there will be CCTV, there will be a witness, there could be forensics that comes down. The crime itself is the actual act of robbing the petrol station. It's not attending the petrol station or going in. So if you're saying you haven't done the robbery, then what we should do is we should put forward a prepared statement, which I would write down exactly what that client is saying that they did that day. So I went to this petrol station at this time, I did this, I did that. Now I read that out in an interview. The officers will obviously have questions that come from that, but they're just questions and they're of no relevance. As long as the main questions are answered, that stops the police being able to, or the court being able to invite any jury to draw an inference from your silence, because you've set out what your defence is. Just because you might not have answered any queries that are ad hoc queries police officers will come up with interviewing techniques, well, they can't draw an inference from that unless there was a relevant question put that wasn't responded to in your prepared statement. Police can ask questions in various different ways, which all mean the same question, but people can understand them differently. So they'll respond differently, and then they say, oh, well, you're lying. Whereas if you've got a solicitor that is just reading out a prepared statement and you're just answering to the points, police will start with, what's your name? Do you like football? You don't have to answer any of those questions. What colour boxes you're wearing? What size shoes are you? None of that's relevant. The only thing that's relevant is the questions that relate to the offence. And that comes with, mine was, I just didn't trust the disclosure. My distrust of the police's honesty, if you like, has saved a number of clients, because what I would do is sit through a whole interview with the client, make notes, and once the police say, well, this was your opportunity to respond and your opportunity to answer, I say, officer, let me stop you there. Leave the legal advice to me. You do your job. This is not, his opportunity is not over until the point he's charged. Right? So he could have made, so he can still make a prepared statement after the interview? Yes. Right. So then I would say, I need 10 minutes with my client, or half an hour with my client, or however long I needed, based upon the questions that were asked, and I would be taking notes. Then I would go back in with my client, and then I would take instructions on specific questions I wanted the answers to, which would enable me to prepare the statement to put forward the defence. Then we'd go back into another interview, and then I'd read the second interview, and then that's when you'd make the statement. It doesn't matter whether you answer questions in the first, second, third interview, but rushing to get out generally doesn't work well for you. And having good advice at that stage is paramount, because every trial starts at the police station. The biggest thing you'll find in court is us trying to defend a client who's been given shite advice to say absolutely nothing at the beginning. Some of the things you're thinking, well, why wouldn't you just answer that? Well, I was told not to. So I give a number of my clients, because that's a massive change in the whole legal game, isn't it? If it's completely underhanded. It's completely underhanded, and it puts defendants at a real disadvantage. The only thing that you as a defence lawyer then can do to help the client is try to bring in a bit of humour. And it's worked for me in a number of trials, because I've had clients who've come to me after they've been to police stations, they've bought the cases, and I'm having to defend them. And I've said, well, you know what? When you're on the stand, you're going to be asked why you didn't speak in the interview. And you're going to be pushed, and the prosecutor is going to say to you, well, you had legal advice, and you decided to either not follow or whatever. Now, mine was, we'll tell the jury this. If you get advice from a doctor and that doctor says you need a heart transplant, you're not going to question his advice. So when a solicitor tells you to be quiet, you call him as he's a professional. You're not going to question his advice.
Yeah.
You need to get that point off to the jury that you are literally following. Because unfortunately, it's not every client doesn't want to be silent. Yeah. Some clients, a lot of mine want to speak. My last client, I told him in front of CTU officers, if you speak in this interview at all, you need another lawyer. I'm leaving because I cannot defend you against what is being brought against you, because I could see what was going on there. And it's important for someone to be there having your back in your corner.
So in my case, right, this is live. So I give a no comment interview. Yeah. Now, if the police decide to continue with the charge and prosecute me in magistrates on the 3rd of March, what are my options because of what I've done with the no comment interview? So one of the defences I'm considering is an ultra vires defence, which is that the arrest was unlawful because the lockdown was unlawful. Whatever, that's just something I'm experimenting with at the moment. But other than that, what can I do as part of my defence? But based on the fact that I've gone no comment.
Well, your defence is different, isn't it? Because I can't really say there's an inference can be drawn from the fact that you've remained silent.
Okay.
You're alleged to have gone out to a protest or encouraged or incited others to breach the law insofar as they're going out to a protest.
So they've got to be put to proof there, haven't they?
Well, not really, because that's what they say. You know, they say that there's no such thing as beyond reasonable doubt. Yeah. The only thing that's beyond reasonable doubt is that the police are crooked. So that's the only thing beyond reasonable doubt.
Beyond reasonable doubt is the criminal threshold that the jury have to be swayed by.
Well, no, it's not. They say that to the public, and a lot of the public understand that to be the case. But in the legal sense, it's so the jury have got to be sure. But even in practicalities, it doesn't work like that, because if you think a jury, if the jury's got to be sure, well, surely that's got to be 12 people have got to be sure. There's 12 people on a jury. If 12 people can't reach a decision, a judge will give a majority direction, which will say, well, 10 people. So if 10 people are sure, is that beyond reasonable doubt? It's obviously not, because there's 2 people who don't agree with that. And then, let's say you've got 8 people who are sure, but 4 people that are not. That jury will be made to sit out in a room in the court for days and days on end, which will basically mean that they can be pressured to change in the mind because they just want to go home also.
Is that what goes on?
That's what goes on, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of trials which have been real cliffhanger, real close, and I mean, juries have been out for 10 days. And you put people in a jury, you're going to have so much pressure in that room going,
come on, let's get home.
Well, if you've got a 9-3, it's only got a turn 1. I had one case, and this is someone who we both know, and I'm not going to mention the name, but this guy ended up with 9 years, and he had a cliffhanging jury that was out for 10 days. There was absolutely no evidence whatsoever on him. But counsel advised him not to take the stand. My advice was that he should take the stand. He didn't take the stand in the end. The jury were out on him for 2 weeks, and he eventually came back. 3 jury members stayed at the court. So once the jury was discharged, they don't have to be there for the sentencing. Once the jury was discharged, 3 of them came back for the sentencing. 3 of them cried in the court and approached me. And jury members, I'm not supposed to approach jury members, but 3 of them cried, approached me and said, we thought he'd only get about 2 years. And basically told me that, you know, they didn't think he was guilty, but because of the time scales that they were kept,
you have to make a decision.
Yeah, you're being chosen. You know, you're being. Imagine the people who all think that they're guilty.
I mean, that would be an interesting conversation to speak with someone who's been on a high-profile jury case of what actually goes on, you know, behind those closed doors. I mean, what is justice? Because that's what's going on there, isn't it? That's you know
That's not justice.
No.
You know, for if you're going to have, you talk about your case is going to be in a magistrate's court, for instance.
Yeah, it's just a summary offence.
Yours is going to be by the civil procedure rules. Yeah. Yours is going to be on the balance of probabilities.
Isn't it criminal?
Yeah, it's criminal, yeah. But it's dealt with on civil procedure rules.
Is it?
It's dealt with under criminal procedure rules, but let's put it like this. The prosecution threshold is on the balance of probability, right? The magistrate, I could go through any single magistrate's court case where someone's been found guilty and just absolutely find loads of doubt in it, you know, all over the place. when the police are coming forward and they're the only witnesses in a case, and the judge says, "Oh, well, I believe that," how can that be beyond reasonable doubt? They're all paid for by the state. They're all part of the same club. They're all seeing each other every single day. You know, there's no fairness in those proceedings at all. They shouldn't be allowed to have any trials without a jury. The only trials that I've ever seen that have been fair are ones with a jury. And even they are not fair because of the rules regarding disclosure, etc., that come with it. You know, there's so much in it that's wrong.
Do you know when you were doing your police representation and you going into police stations up and down the country, now that you were at the other side of the line, did you find that you had a different level of respect for the police as you were getting to know them a little bit behind the mask? Did you have maybe more sympathy or empathy for the job they do?
Some, yes.
Okay.
Because there are some wrong people out there, and there are some people that, you know,
the police are a necessary evil.
Yeah. I fully support the fact that there are police for, say, you know, if my mother was burgled or my mother was assaulted, I'd want it to be police that go and deal with it. Unfortunately, you know, they're taking a back at a queue approach to some of these things which are proper crimes.
Because they could be heroes, couldn't they? I mean, they really could be heroes of our society, but for some reason that, you know, they choose to take on, you know, lots of things that they shouldn't be going anywhere near.
But this is because the law's evolved over time, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you go back to the date of, say, 1825 or something like that, I think it was when the constabulary was first formed, and I think it was they were named after, it was Robert Peel.
Robert Peel.
Yeah, where they got the name Bobbies from, and in that day it was more of a community police officer, and what the Crown were doing was taking over the community style police officer that communities had created for themselves with volunteers, and over the years, or over the past century, they've sort of commercialised it now.
Well, a constable, the office of constable is an honourable office. You know, it's an honourable office, but it was. Well, it still is, but it's just being corrupted. The office itself is still an honourable office, you know, but it's the people who choose to corrupt the office that, you know, demean it from what it truly is, you know. And it's like all police are constables, even the chief constable, they're all still constables. The rank is only being imposed internally for themselves. From as far as the public are concerned, they're all constables.
Yeah, but not all of them now. You've got a lot of private. If you look at the
G4,
police, you know, G4. Well, they do basically or Serco. They do inside the prisons, or they'll do even in the custody suites. And you'd have civilian police officers. They're not constables. You've got the motorway police. What are they called?
Traffic cops.
Highway patrol or something like that. They're not police officers. They don't swear an oath. You know, so for me, there's a lot of NCA, National Crime Agency. They're not police.
There's a lot of private police starting to creep into the system?
So many private police, you know, all of these organisations. And the thing for me that is makes them corruptible is the financial benefits and incentives that they're given in doing the jobs when targeting people. Take drug dealers, for instance. You know, they get to keep a portion of whatever funds it is that they seize from people, which gives them pocket. So pocket doesn't put money back into the taxpayers.
Okay, so let's just describe what pocket is. Pocket is the police.
Proceeds of Crime
Act.
So this is basically when they say you've committed the crime and you've made ill-gotten gains, then this is proceeds of crime. Essentially, it's duplicity, right? Because what happens is you be prosecuted for, say, a drugs offence, and you can be found guilty of the drugs offence. Some people may be guilty and some people may not. I've had experiences on both sides of it with people. But once they've been found guilty, they're given a sentence. Now, a lot of drug dealers live this lavish lifestyle that, you know, they haven't got a pot to piss in. Right? But they've been driving hired cars or borrowed cars and, you know, going and getting flats in town and, you know, having champagne with all the girls. They don't have any money or any assets. And what will happen is, because the level of offending, for instance, let's say you've got a big gang and you've got a driver of that gang. He's just a driver, just taking something here to there, being paid crap money, not really anything. But he'll get, say, 10 years in jail. Not only will he get that...
For conspiracy.
Well, it could be possession with intent to supply. It could be crossing county lines. It could be importation. You know, there's a number of offences that you can go with for it. But you've always got the underlings who are basically just doing the joeying, if you like, for the bigger players. He will get a pocket just as much as the bigger player. And he'll get a pocket that could be for 30, 40, 50, 60,000 pounds. He might not have nothing to take, or he might have a house, or someone might have something. But this all costs money to come through, and it's a second crime. Now, they don't receive a fair trial in that because it's considered to be an administrative offence. So basically, you've had your fair trial with the main criminal proceedings. Now
we want your money.
This is just administrative. We're just taking your money now. So you don't really have the same rights as in defending it.
This is civil.
This is civil. We now cross into civil, and what we do is the rules in this become that the assumptions are all in favour of the police. So you're assumed to be this, you're assumed to be that. It makes it so much easier for them to get the orders. Someone without any money will generally then maybe get the order wiped out to, say, £1 order, which means they can't have money again in the future, or they're going to come after it.
So
but how does that help people?
Is that like a bankruptcy, is it?
Sort of.
Yeah.
It just stops you coming into money ever. You know, you could win the lottery, then they could take it off you for this thing, but it stops people sort of wanting to get employment or gainful employment when they come out, and they're bound to a life of crime then.
Now, remember you telling me one time about pocket was that the money that they confiscate, the police confiscate, doesn't go into the central fund.
No.
It goes into that particular police force's pot.
Well, imagine like a gang that go round robbing drug dealers.
Because that's an incentive to go on piracy on the open seas, isn't it?
You've heard of people target. You get criminals, right, who do violent crime, and they target specific drug dealers because. What's the benefit of targeting a drug dealer? He's not going to be so keen to pick up the phone to phone the police, to call them in to help him. So it makes it... All the police have done is copied that model.
Yeah.
They just target drug dealers, and what they get is the police, the prosecution, and the courts divvy this money up.
The public will just think, though, so what?
They'll think so what?
Yeah, because you took the risk, and then the police have got it.
But when you offer someone a financial incentive... then can you really trust the evidence? And you will have a number of people that will scream to high heaven their innocence. And they may well be... We all know people who are doing things that maybe they shouldn't be doing in accordance with the law. And just because they are doesn't mean we won't talk to them. I mean, my entire client list was people that was doing things that they shouldn't be doing. That's why I was called out to do... does that mean I should be involved in those conspiracies, or there should be doubt over me because I was seen speaking to someone outside a shop, or because I was seen talking to someone, down the road in town when they've been just 5 minutes before meeting someone else and doing some form of conspiracy that I would have had no knowledge.
Of
course. And there are many clients that I've represented that have found themselves in exactly that scenario.
Well, so where a conspiracy net has been spread wide and far, and just by the fact you were talking to someone, you get dragged in.
Conspirators are not just lone soldiers that work in themselves. They speak to family members, they speak to girlfriends, boyfriends,
so
friends,
those people
aunties,
are then
uncles,
subject
cousins.
to the pocket.
Those people can be subject to prosecution because of their involvement, because of their knowledge of because it can just look against them. And people will plead guilty a lot of time to things that they're not guilty of.
Just to get off? Or a plea deal?
It's a plea deal, isn't it? Yeah. They know that the odds are stacked against them. They don't feel confident. So what they'll do is they'll enter a plea because the advice is you get 33% credit, if you like, is what they'll say. Is it's a third off if you the earliest you plead guilty.
If you pay us.
Well, no, if you plead guilty. Okay. Well, again, paying you. So I've got clients that have got money, right, and they've got a pocket, etc. So you're negotiating deals. I mean, this is the most profound negotiation.
The money goes to the police force.
Well, yeah, you're paying it to the Crown. It gets, as far as I understand it, it gets divided between the court, the CPS, and the police force. So this is a divvying up of funds. Just like a bank robbery in the same sense.
A legal one.
And that, for me, this comes at taxpayers' expense because, bear in mind, we pay for the investigation, the court time, the barristers. You've got counsel, QCs, all charging tens and tens of thousands of pounds to collect, I don't know, 15 grand, 20 grand. The cost of collecting that by far outweighs the financial gain. The Proceeds of Crime Act was brought in to take proceeds of crime from oligarchs, if you like, people that made significant amounts of money, not the local weed dealer who's made $5,000 at some point and pissed it up the wall.
Yeah, but that's like the Terrorism Act was brought in to stop terrorists, but they use it for all kinds, don't they? Once they get these acts in, right, they say, oh, it's only going to be temporary, or it's only going to be for this specific group. That's just a new power that's being given to the authorities, and they will execute it and exploit it any which way they can.
The very dangerous powers that they're being given, because you'd have to have a really genuine police force, which I just don't think exists, to be able to implement laws with the powers that they've got and the reach. It used to be a case in the law that the rain may enter, the wind may enter, all the elements may enter, but the King of England may not. Now, fucking hell, Tom, Dick and Harry can enter on the say-so of some jumped-up inspector in a police station because someone's been nicked with a spliff, if you like. So it gives them carte blanche to go through people's doors, whether you live with your mother, your father, your family, etc. And it can be quite it's quite intrusive into your personal life, if you like. Someone searching through maybe your wife's knickers drawer and things like that. It's not nice.
It's wrong.
And it's completely wrong, because going to the magistrate's court to get a warrant is like going to the shop to get a Mars bar. There's no question. Yeah, they grant it every single time. Why do you have to water that down even more to then say, an inspector can grant it? That was done for the basis of...
So what? So they have devolved the power from magistrates granting warrants to now just inspector rank?
Well, they haven't devolved it. They just created the new one with pace. So now an inspector, if someone's in custody or they arrest someone for it, and this can be as little as a spliff. A kid walking down the road with a spliff, they can arrest him, they can take him straight to his house and do a Section 18 search, right, with the authorisation of an inspector. And these inspectors, as I've just said to you, what happened with me, with Sergeant Paul Forster, this is just tick, 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 tick. No one's paying attention to the rules. And it doesn't even matter, because even if you then find out at a later stage, well, that was unlawful or that one, it doesn't undo anything that they may or may not find. And sometimes they don't find things that absolutely point to a criminal offence, but they can certainly make a criminal offence out of it by just coming up with some supposition on the material that might be available to them, and then they download people's phones, and people do. A lot of people may well.
What's that about? You just mentioned download people's phones, because I read something about that in the.
But you take your phone when you're arrested. One of the primary sources of evidence against anyone is a phone. Yeah. Mobile phones must have been created by the police and the courts, because.
But they don't even need a warrant, do they?
No, and it can be a criminal offence for you not to give your PIN number to your phone, because they don't class that as if that's personal information in your head. Well, I would say it is, but that offence can carry between, say, 2 and 5 years.
What, for not giving them your password?
For not giving your password to your phone. My advice is, if you can't remember your password, well, you just can't remember it.
Your fingerprint, you can.
Well, fingerprints are easy to be taken, and fingerprint passwords.
No, you just stick your finger on the phone.
Well, fingerprint passwords as well. Your fingerprints can be everywhere. You can literally mirror a fingerprint.
So after your lengthy experience in dealing with the police from both sides of the spectrum, from growing up in Kensington and dealing with all that to becoming a lawyer in a sense and dealing with them on the other side, what's your lasting impression upon what we can do to reform the police so that it's a fair and just organisation, or is it too far gone?
I think it's too far gone. I don't think it's the police that need the reform. I think it's the law. It's the law and the court process. If you go through a court process, you'll be asked, if I've got to defend you, the police are making an allegation. So the police have done all the investigation. The police have got all the police officers, the prosecution, barristers, etc., all bringing the case against you. You've got a lawyer. A lawyer, maybe a barrister, maybe a QC, depending on the severity of the charge. But we rely on the information that comes from the police to be able to see if there's any, because they're supposed to follow all lines of inquiry. So we look to see if there's any inconsistencies. They will pick the best part out. What we get is drip-fed information, and it's at a late stage in the where you've got no time to react. You've got to be really active and proactive in chasing down the material that you can get. The disclosure requirements, the Criminal Procedure Investigations Act 1996 governs disclosure. And this is where, for instance, your case, I'll use as an example. Depending on the defence you're going to take with your case, you could go forward and you've got a hearing in March. That hearing will be set for a trial hearing in March. Not just a first appearance, they'll be wanting to deal with it done and dusted then. Magistrates' courts don't really apply any rules. They're just designed as a sort of money-making process. You plead guilty, take your fine, go home, right, pay the costs, don't do it again. If it's more serious, they'll advance it through. If you want disclosure, you can use court proceedings to open up certain avenues.
When you say disclosure, you mean seeing what the other side have against you?
Okay, well, let's take... If I was going to be defending your case, I would be saying, well, okay, there's no defence to you unless you've organised this properly through some philanthropist, and George Soros is going to pop to the court and, tell you, everything's going to be all right, Lawrence, I've sorted this. Right, then that defence is not open to you.
Which defence is that? Not guilty?
Well, not having a philanthropist having organised the protest for you. So that defence is not open to you unless it's being properly organised by a company or a philanthropist, right, who has then done the risk assessments and, got your hand sanitizer and all of this bollocks that they want you to have, right? So that defence is not open to you. So your next only available defence is to be challenging the actual law. Now, ordinarily, the law would have to be challenged via a judicial review. But it was challenged by judicial review. And
I don't know whether that one was. I think there was another specific area by Simon Dolan.
Yeah, that may be the case. Yeah, Dolan.
Yeah,
that was it. Dolan and others.
I think that's a specific area that they've attacked.
No, it's not. No, it's not. They did a judicial review on multiple subjects. One was liberty, Article 5, your right to liberty. The other was the right to private and family life, right? They also did the right to protest. The only one that wasn't ruled on was the right to protest. And that's at paragraphs 93 to 97 of the Dolan judgment. Now, this was where the judge was saying, because it's a three-tier test, is one, is it prescribed by law, which under the Corona Act 2020, it's prescribed by law. Two, is it necessary? And three, is it proportionate? So is the right to protest being taken away through necessity, right? I.e., is this pandemic so serious that it is absolutely necessary for the right to be taken away?
But don't they then have to prove the pandemic?
Well, this is where people are not arguing, and that's where I would defend.
That's the point, isn't it?
That's exactly it's the same with, say, for instance, Donald Trump and what's going on in America. You look at what's going on in America, you look at everyone complaining, you've breached me constitutional rights.
The burden of proof is with them, isn't it?
Well, it's not that the burden of proof's with them, no, because the attack... if you look at the American Constitution, everyone's attacking, going, oh, I've not been given my rights have been taken away, blah, 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 blah. What they're not doing is attacking the pandemic itself.
Yeah, okay.
Not the fact they've declared a pandemic. So therefore, you claim that your rights are breached, right? You're saying, well, I've got the right to protest. Well, they're saying, well, we've declared a pandemic.
Well, it's Article 2 or Article 11 of the Human Rights Act says that you can only remove your right to protest if there is a few things. One of them is being a public health situation. Right.
Well, yeah. So you're right. It's limited. Article 6 right is limited. I think your Article 11 right. Article 10 and Article 11 is the freedom of assembly and freedom of expression. So they're your two rights. Article 2 is the right not to suffer.
Sorry, not Article 2. Article 11.
Right. So now, Article 10 and Article 11 are your relevant rights.
So they're saying that we can remove your Article 11 rights to assembly if there is a public health crisis, which, they're claiming that there is.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Right. If there is, then the onus is upon them to prove the public health crisis. Yeah. So then we've got to ask, what's the definition, what's the criteria, haven't we?
Well, no, what you've got is the 3 points are, is it prescribed by law? Is it necessary and is it proportionate? So your argument is not one of, well, is it prescribed by law? Because it's prescribed by law. What you're saying is that the government's actions are ultra-vires insofar as there is no pandemic or public health crisis that exists now
in order
as we
to
know
remove
it,
our rights,
which is necessary and or proportionate. Right, so therefore the law is ultra-vires.
Because the first thing I'd say was that, okay, what are the deaths for the last 3 years? what are the total number of deaths for the last 3 years, and then if
yeah, but you're asking. See, now this is where you can ask that, and who are you going to ask?
Well, it's not that I'm going to ask it. That would be part of evidential submission, right? Would be that how can we be in a pandemic if the death count is the same and has been for the last 3 years?
How are you going to prove that the government's actions are not proportionate or necessity by doing that?
Because there's no pandemic. Because if they're saying,
but they're going to stand, but without you summonsing. Say, this is what I would do. I would go full nuclear.
Summons them all.
No, you don't need to summons them all.
Yeah.
Right? You say, okay, you want to fucking give me a fine for this little shitty offence of protesting, which I believe is my fundamental right.
Yeah.
And I believe, if I know there's a public health crisis out there, I'm not going to go outside.
Of course, it used to be common sense.
You're liars, right? You're absolute liars, and you're taking away our rights. So now what I want is the Secretary of State for Health and Education, because he is the person who is the one who has brought in this law and taken away your right. I want him brought to the court because it is him who has made that decision. So only he can answer as to the proportionality and the necessity question. And then I want to cross-examine him on the basis of proportionality and necessity, i.e. which experts and medical advice did he take it over. I also want disclosure as to the government's reports and findings. You could potentially open up the
can of worms.
Yeah. See, it's about fighting, right? And sometimes it's like, that's just not worth the hassle, right? For whatever the fine is that they'll come. But that's what I would be suggesting, is requesting disclosure on the reports that were given to the government and who gave them to the government.
At what stage in the process would you do that? Because right now it's still, okay, you've been charged, you've got to appear before magistrates on the 3rd of March. At what point do I submit disclosure requests?
Well, it depends on, generally you will get initial disclosure at either the first hearing or before the hearing, and they'll send you out.
You're saying it's just going to be, I'm walking into a trial?
Well, you are.
Yeah.
It's a kangaroo court. These no doubt are kangaroo courts.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean you can't fight in them, right? Because you can pin them down. They have to give the appearance of fairness. They don't have to be fair. They just have to appear that they've been fair. So when it comes, you've got to force them into doing rulings which you can later potentially challenge that we're unfair. So if you're prosecuted, what you'll get is a set of papers which will be initial disclosure, and you'll get asked to indicate whether you're going to plead guilty or not guilty. Have you had that?
No, I haven't had anything yet. All I've had is the
charge sheet from
the police. That's it.
So that would be your first hearing, but they would anticipate you to be pleading guilty, because it'll probably be sort of strict liability offence, insofar as what a strict liability offence is it means the burden of proof shifts to you. Yeah. You've got to prove that, well, this is an offence, it's an offence written in law. The challenge that you'd have to have, the only one available to you, is that it wasn't necessary and it wasn't proportionate. That the government, can't take away your right to protest. And that would be, in my view, although there's no inference to draw from the fact that he didn't say that in the police station, well, it's a principal point of view, isn't it? Yeah. You're standing up for your rights, you're standing on your rights, and you're saying, well, sod the consequences. At the end of the day, I believe that you can't infringe on these rights.
Oh, no, I'm saying you've got to prove to me that you can take away these rights.
Yeah, but they don't have to prove that. All they have to do is they have to say, Parliament. I once had a judge say to me, Mr. Heffey, Parliament, when I was doing my common law thing, Parliament have written the law. If you want to, because I was saying, the law doesn't apply to me, right? And the judge is going, well, if you want to disregard, you need to go and speak to Parliament. I said, I don't need to speak to Parliament. You need to speak to Parliament, because you're the fucking dickhead believing that them twats can write laws that engage me.
Well, the thing is
that comes.
Well, the thing is we're either governed by consent, right? And if we are, then they have to follow the correct rules and procedures in order to have the authority to govern by consent, right? And if they were governing by consent, they would listen to the voice of the people, especially in times like this. If we're not governed by consent, that means we're governed by tyranny. There's only two options.
Let me ask you a question.
And if we are governed by tyranny, which they won't admit, because that ultimately, compels rebellion, doesn't it?
Do you believe we're governed by consent?
No. That's why I protested, doesn't it? That was the point of the protest.
We've never been governed by consent. They claim that governed by consent is the majority of the people voting. So let's say I don't want to vote because I don't consent to any government. There's not a single political party I'd vote for Donald Trump, right? He's about the only person I'd vote for, right? But how can I be governed by consent? Because you can't take my right and say, oh, well, you're not exercising your right to vote, so you don't have the right to be governed by consent. I'm not governed by consent. I'm governed by force, as is everyone else. You know, we look at Brexit and what's gone on with that.
But they can't admit that. They can't admit
well,
that
they can. They almost do.
Yeah.
What are people going to do?
No, because in this country, the police openly say that they police by consent. That's their motto, isn't it? That's why British police separates them. So, and that only flows from Parliament, is that we're governed by consent, because they can't admit the other one, which is we're governed by tyranny.
Well, I don't know why they do it quite.
Because
to those in the know, we already know.
Yeah,
well,
those in the know, we already know.
What would people do? People have had the rights stripped from them throughout a long period of time.
Well, we have to fight for them, don't we? Every generation has their fight of trying to pull back what they try and take away from us. You know, every generation has it. And it goes,
so what have these fights achieved?
Well, it's ebb and flow, isn't it? It's an ebb and flow.
It's all we've seen for the past, I don't know, during my lifetime, is our rights eroded.
But the thing is, but we had to have them in the first place for them to erode. So there's been a constant struggle, right, between us and them, or whoever it is, you know, of us trying to pull back our rights and them taking them away, and using all these.
Our rights lasted at least up until the late 1900s. But then again, you know, the right to bear arms and defend yourself was actually a right then. You know, over that time. Now you can't even go out with literally a knife,
a spud gun.
Yeah. It's ridiculous, you know. You can't have anything to protect yourself. You can't have any weapons, and I think it's a 3-inch blade. But the thing is that they've done such a job on people's minds that the fact that you're even saying that, a lot of the public go, well, yeah, of course not. You know, we don't want knives in society.
Or what do you want a spoon for? Why would you go out into the street with a spoon? You know.
Yeah. You know, it's a bit of a ridicule, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, you see societies that have weapons generally have them, and the good of society, the safer, because they can defend themselves and protect themselves. Just because you've got a weapon, we've all got knives in the kitchen drawer.
But like
we don't run outside stabbing people.
But like I said earlier, is the police have got guns, the army have got guns, the criminals have got guns, all of them, right? Well, not all of them, but a lot of them, right? The gangs have got guns. Right, and the only people who haven't got any weapons are the law-abiding citizens, you know, and all the enemy seems to have them, but the people don't. I'm not saying that we should have guns, right? But it's more about our ability, our right to defend ourselves from, you know, egregious attacks. It's just been stripped away, and it makes us sit in ducks, doesn't it? Yeah, that's what it does. It makes us sit in ducks. I
think the law is a game. It's a sick game, you know. And the best analogy I've done of it was I described it as a game of football. You've got two teams kicking a ball around. You've got the referee who's a judge. You've got the crowd that is a jury. You know, the prosecution is one team, the defence is another team. The defendant is the ball. He's just getting volleyed all around the place. And it depends on how good his team are in defending and also attacking as to what's going to happen in his future. You know, because if you've got a defence team that's just going to allow a pure abuse of the process, he hasn't got a chance. He doesn't stand a chance. And I've worked with a lot of different barristers, lawyers from up and down the country, etc. I could count on one hand how many of them had rate. You know, when this was for me, it's like, I think that this is a dead fight. I see people protesting, and I'm all good for people standing up for the rights. But my advice is get the fuck out of this country. I am not messing you. Get out of this country. This country is fucking shot. It's done. It's gone.
So what do you think about Brexit? Do you think that's a false dawn? Do you think, how does it match up next to this COVID situation? What are your thoughts? Because we've just had the deal, haven't we? Whatever bullshit that is, and who knows what's going on with these gang of trucks.
I didn't want to make my eyes bleed over Christmas having to read it. But, you know, that's like, 2,000 pages of nonsense. I mean, I really don't understand. I've got businesses, right? I've done a couple of deals for you. So, you know, I work in a deal. It's quite easy to close a deal. You've got two sides. You know what you want. The other side know what they want. If you can't meet somewhere in the middle, there is no deal. And for the red lines that they were putting forward, which is, you know, sovereignty, well, that's a red line. That's a major, major factor in why people voted for leaving the EU. The fisheries, another major factor in why people voted for leaving the EU. And yet we've seemed to have caved in on them and we're running it right down to the wire. So now we've got a deal that's in place that a lot of people don't yet understand, or we don't know what the consequences of are. We don't know how good that is for us, because I believe it's about 2,000 odd pages that's been written. It's only just being pushed through into law. It was very simple to do a couple of years ago. Forget all the simple bits we can negotiate on. Let's deal with the bits we can't negotiate on, because if we can't find a way forward, let's just call that a day.
Well, if it feels as if it's like all they've done is just kick the can down the road again, you know.
To what intent, though? Yeah. To drag the public through. I mean, it's been great for a lot of YouTubers. It's been great for a lot of people who are all, you know, trying to find the way through this and report on it and say what is and what isn't. But ultimately, you know, all it's done is left us with this bad taste in our mouth, as knowing, well, we've had a referendum, the people have spoken, and if we're governed by consent, I watched the
Gina Miller. I mean, it was 5 years ago.
I don't know.
They're still fucking arguing over the detail.
You know, they bought the Corona Act in within 6 months. Like boom, done. Take away your rights, take away your liberties. Fine, close down businesses. We're going to trample all over you. But you know what? You voted for Brexit. That's it. It takes time. It takes time. You know, people talk about free movement, and it makes me laugh, because most of the people who talk about free movement are people who've never moved off the couch. Right? They go, well, free movement's going to end. It won't end for you moving from the couch to the offie, right? That's a fact. I travel across Europe, and I've travelled in a car. So if I'm Bulgarian and I come here in a Bulgarian vehicle and I drive to England, I don't have to pay for tax in England, right? I don't have to pay for insurance. My insurance and my tax from Bulgaria will cover me. But if I'm English and I travel likewise, the only countries I've got free travel through is, okay, you go to Dover, you come to the port, you go through the port, you've got to pay for your ferry, obviously, using a private company. You get in France, you've got to be very careful to avoid the toll roads, but you can avoid the toll roads, and that can be free. You don't need a vignette or any form of tax. You move into Germany, exactly the same. The roads can be free. I don't even think they've got toll roads in Germany, not that I've come across. But as soon as I hit Austria, there's toll roads and there's vignette. So I've got to pay £15 or £30 for a vignette.
What's a vignette?
A vignette is like our road tax.
Okay.
So over abroad, all these countries call it a vignette. It's an EU thing. The EU says, look at it like this. The EU is telling you you've got all these freedoms. Right? We guarantee you all these fundamental rights. And it's them taking it away from you. And then they're telling you, well, you know, we'll do away with free... There's not free movement if you're British, which is why the British voted to leave. Anyone who moves out of the house, has got a job, probably understands that the EU was a bad thing for them. I don't see what benefit the EU has ever brought to us. I only see it as stripping our assets. And when we talk about a divorce bill, a divorce goes two ways. I don't understand why we are not claiming our slice of the EU that we funded. The EU's a private organisation.
They said we were paying £350 million a week.
Yeah, that was Farage and that, wasn't it, that come out. And what the truth to that is, there's discrepancies with it, but yet we were certainly paying a lot of money to them. It doesn't matter what the exact figure is. It's a figure we should not be paying. You know, not only have we been paying that money, but we've had our industries gutted because, you know, look at what they're talking about now. Recently, they say the level playing. All the EU is a monopoly. They talk about the level playing field. Well, how's it a level playing field if manufacturing can be set up in Bulgaria, for instance, where the minimum wage is, say, 600 lev a month? 600 lev a month is about £300 a month, in comparison with the minimum wage in England, which might be about £1,000 a month. £1,000 is about 2,200 lev. So how can two industries which require just labour be competitive with each other if one is minimum wages, say £300 a month, and the other's £2,000 a month? We can't compete with them. at all. And you've got your level playing field. This goes right the way across. We suffer an uneven playing field right the way across it. I don't think we'll ever be allowed to leave.
I know, that's what it feels like, doesn't it? Because I haven't paid much attention to it at all, really. Right, but one of the few things that I've picked up from it was that in 5 years we'll get control of our fisheries again. So that'll be 10 years from the time that we voted to leave the EU. 10 years later, we'd finally get control of our fisheries. It just sounds...
To be honest,
mental.
I think that's smokescreen in minutes. I think there's more to it. These are the things, when they're not wanting you to see stuff, they'll argue about other stuff. And the fisheries... All right, Hull is a big fishing area. We haven't got many ports which are big fishing areas
we used
anymore.
to. It used to be, we're an island, aren't we? We're an island nation. Fishing was one of our major exports.
It used to be, yeah. But, the cost of living here now is so expensive. And the cost of, this is where all the foreign workers come in, isn't it? They'll go to a cheaper country where the wage is cheaper to engage people to do... those tasks like manufacturing now, you couldn't really bring manufacturing back to England because if you've got to pay someone, say, a minimum wage
tariffs, isn't it? That's what Trump does. He says, well, if you wanna take your manufacturing plant and go over there where they're paying slave labour, that's the only way they do it. They go to China because they can get the labour done by slaves. Let's be open about it. That's what's going on. But because there's no tariffs, right, is that we can't compete at home. Right, so the moment you put tariffs on, you say, well, actually, you can make it slave labour, but to come in, we're going to charge you this amount to bring it in to enable the home country to compete on a manufacturing level. You've got a level playing field then, because the price of the slave labour is offset by the height of the tariff, and that's what Trump is doing. The moment he put the tariffs in, right, all of a sudden manufacturing went, well, we can come back home.
Yeah, but on some things, yeah, if you're building a vehicle, cars, things that are of expense, yeah. But look at your standard manufacturing, making bars of soap,
Chinese,
making magnets for, kitchen doors,
plastic shit,
all sorts of crap. You couldn't possibly make that on the minimum wage we have, and you couldn't impose tariffs because all that does is gives an additional cost to the end user.
Well, they just do it. They do it cleverly, don't they? So they'll do it on the raw materials. Right, rather than the manufactured goods. So Trump finds a way around it, doesn't he? Where he just hits big areas of
I think Trump,
of trade.
I don't think he's so much. I think he's mainly concentrated, from what I can see, on car manufacturing. So that's a big one of the big manufacturing is the car industries is what he's focused on, and making their own aeroplanes. And if you're dealing in that level of manufacturing, then certainly tariffs can assist you. But there's also a lot of other manufacturing. Like imagine us being in a war now. Where does most of our food produce come from? What are we being threatened with as a result of Brexit? Food shortages, medicine shortages. Everything is going to be
threatening to put us under siege, aren't they? Basically?
Because everything comes from abroad.
Yeah.
Because we can't afford to manufacture it ourselves. Because people want to come here because of the high wage. To us, £9 an hour. I couldn't live on £9 an hour. Yeah. I applaud people that can, and I don't even spend much. But a lot of people come here. £9 an hour to them is a hell of a lot of money if they can manage to find themselves a room to stay in, real cheap accommodation, then going home. In Bulgaria, you struggle to spend money. Well, you don't struggle to spend. My cigarettes I smoke, obviously. My cigarettes will cost me £2.50 a pack, 5 leather pack.
Yeah, but in this country it's mainly tax, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but that's £2.50 a pack as opposed to £11 a pack.
Yeah, but most of that
four times the price.
Most of that £11 is tax.
Tax and duty, yeah.
So
even alcohol.
So that is a tariff in a way, but it's hitting us rather than it's hitting.
Well, it always hits the end consumer. Yeah. No matter who you put the tariff on, a business operates to make money, doesn't it? Well, no,
because what Trump is doing is he's taking the tariff and then giving it to the producer, wasn't he? So it was like the farmers who were being hit hardest by the tariffs. So the money he was making from the tariff, he
gave them a portion of it,
to ensure that they could see the war out.
Of course, this is the thing that they can do is they have this. It's like a lot of businesses will give a government as their free free rein, if you like, to say, well, okay, we're going to reduce, we will give you. One of the things Trump got was deals, wasn't it, on his tax rebates going through the 80s, 90s. I mean, I used to think Donald Trump was a myth, but, you know, people go, oh, buying properties like Donald Trump, and never knew he existed until he was running for president.
Whoa!
I didn't know anything about America, I wasn't interested in it. But it was like, you know, when you look at this, is the governments have the ability to say, well, instead of charging you 20% corporation tax, we'll do this niche deal with you that we'll give you 0% corporation tax. And that's one of the things Trump's doing, is giving a reduced tax rebate, which other people are saying, oh, well, this is giving the rich and the... No, it's not. Because forget what you give them as in the corporation tax rebate. You've got all the national insurance contributions, the PAYE contributions, VAT. You know, the government is tax. Everything is taxed. You know, it's just completely taxed right the way through. So, okay, you might have to give a little bit of that tax back. But for a major company coming into your... you charge a small... I've got small companies that charge 19% corporation tax here. A big company comes in and they're only charged 5%. What right have I got to complain if my company's say paying £20,000 a year in tax, corporation tax, but that company that's only paying 5%, well, they're paying £1 million. Surely £1 million, you know, bringing that type of business in is much better for the economy.
So speaking of Trump,
Yeah.
you know, as we can see, what's happening in America at the moment is absolutely crucial, not only for the Americans, but also for Europeans, for us. You know, what are your thoughts on how that's developing? Are you keeping a close eye on it? Because it feels to me as if Trump loses, then the forces that are pushing the Chinese Communist Party and, you know, the other hard left factions that are making their moves, how do you see it unfolding?
I think we're in dangerous times, aren't we? Because we've been overtaken by this left-wing ideology for years, and as I say, didn't get involved in politics at all until I'm in law. Politics fucking disgusts me, to be honest. But I mean, if Trump doesn't get in, what are we going to see? Are we going to see kids being openly traded on the internet for sale? Because that Joe Biden,
Sniffy Joe,
suspect him, isn't he?
Yeah.
You know, you look at the material.
but he's clearly an agent of the Chinese Communist Party. Because when you see Hunter Biden's laptop and you see all the evidence of how he's paid $1.5 billion by the Chinese bank, you know, it was just to get access to Joe. I mean, he's clearly 100% an agent of the Chinese Communist Party. So if he gets in, you know.
Well, you've still got all the area of Obama before him, haven't you? You've still got all the area of the pedophilia that's been going on through Europe. You know, Europe's involved. This is not just isolated to America. Everything that's gone on. You've got Prince Andrew, who was connected to Epstein. You've got no questions being asked. He suspiciously died or killed himself, whatever you want to say. But for me, Trump's the only person who's actually stood up to this perverse I don't know, child exploitation that's been going on. And Hunter Biden's son, Hunter Biden himself, if you like, Joe Biden's son, having these things on his laptop, not being investigated. What does that tell you? You've got to be powerful people to be able to cease an investigation.
Imagine getting your laptop caught. Imagine being that off your face on crack, right? That you think, you know, take the laptop down the shop, will you?
I've had clients who've gone to me. I was being chased by the fucking ambulance, you know, right? Looking round, but to leave your laptop with kiddie pornography on.
It's not just kiddie pornography. It's like it's that
state secrets.
State secrets deals you would do with the Chinese government.
I have no idea what's on that laptop, right? But I tell you what, it just shows the level of people that you're playing with, though.
Well, that's
I would class these as thick,
Yeah.
unintelligent people.
Yeah.
But you're dead right to describe them as arrogant, because that is exactly what it is the arrogance that they have for knowing that the strings that they pull, which makes me feel even more as to, can this ever be changed?
Yeah, I know.
Can we defeat this? Is it even worth fighting for? Or should you just not try to live the best life you can with your family?
Well, I think we're going to find out a big answer to that question is going to come on January the 6th, which is not far away, because that's the next big date in the calendar where Trump is, for the first time, by the way, has asked for a protest. And they're expecting 1 million people in Washington, D.C. I don't know. We'll see what happens. And then we've got the final date, which is the inauguration on the 20th of January. So So it's not like it's going to go on forever. We're going to find out.
Do you remember that day 4 years ago? Do you remember where we was?
It was a good party. It was a good party. But so that neatly brings us to the end of this first, I guess, of many conversations we're going to have now. If people are, in a cell, cold, quiet, don't know how to get pace, and the police ask them, do you want legal representation? Where can people find you, Neil? Where are you online? Are you on Facebook? Are you on Instagram? Have you got a YouTube channel? Tell people how they can find you.
I've got a YouTube channel that I had from years ago. I haven't been active on it until just recently when I've done that.
What's it called?
It's just my name,
Neil Heffey.
Yeah. I'm on Facebook.
You're on Facebook.
I'm on Facebook, again, just my name.
Yeah.
I'm not under any pseudo names or, any of the stupid cartoon names that people are using. I've considered it because it should be a funny subject, but yeah, I'm on there. I'm not too much, but I'm there to give people help and advice where I can.
So if they want to find you, they can find you on Facebook under Neil Heffey. They can find you on YouTube, send you the message, say hello, all those things.
Yeah, if someone, if people generally have similar problems. So if someone has, different issues and they're wanting advice, I'm
do your best.
I can't see myself coming back to be living in this cesspit. I'm more likely to be settling out where I am. So I'd probably do like YouTube videos and just put some things up, just to give whatever help. And I'll upload documents to Google Drives, etc. And that way I'm sort of helping multiple people rather than the one or two. Cool. It's just not for me no more.
All right, cool. Well, listen, Neil Heffey, it's been a pleasure.
And you, mate.
It's right, mate.
Take care.